Alrighty. Hello again, everybody, and we welcome you to Dialed In. I'm Thom Brennaman. Great to have you with us. All right, you know the deal now. We come your way on Mondays and Fridays. Mondays, we come your way live on Chatterbox. That's at 9:15 in the morning, a.m. Eastern Time. Then we'll post on the Believe Network a little bit later on in the day. Casey, we can go ahead and run that up if you would. And then on Fridays, we will be here after Off the Bench at high noon. And we'll post later on the Believe Network. If you want to download us, just search Dialed In with Thom Brennaman, and you'll be dialed in. Fridays, like today, we generally like having a big interview. You know, recently we've had Chip Carey from the St. Louis Cardinals, Chris Myers from Fox Sports. We had Barry Rosner from Chicago. We also had Justin Williams from The Athletic talking about everything that's NIL, college sports, etc. Great stuff. Last week, Charlie Goldsmith covering the Reds. Please follow us on X at Thom Brennaman TV and welcome aboard. The Reds are back at it tonight after getting washed out by rain in the series finale yesterday against Milwaukee. All things considered, maybe it's a good thing they got rained out the way they're playing right now. They've dropped 4 of their last 6. And that, of course, was on the heels of winning 4 of their first 6. So all in all, 500, not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. The issue lately, though, is the offense. In 3 of the 4 losses, they've scored 2 runs or fewer. Over the last 6 games, 10 for 59 with runners in scoring position. And really the 2 guys in the middle of the order that they're counting on heavily. Jeimer Candelario, Christian Encarnacion Strand, struggling. They're hitting 158 combined. 198 on base percentage, 276 slugging percentage, but we're not going to get too worked up here. It's only 12 games in. Tonight, the Redlegs on the road to face one of the worst teams in baseball, the Chicago White Sox. It's the opener of a 3-game series. Andrew Abbott gets a ball in Game 1 tonight against right-hander Chris Flexen. First pitch at 7:40. Tomorrow, Nick Lodolo makes his season debut after almost a year on the injured list with that broken tibia. Round 1 of the Masters just wrapped up a little while ago. The leader is still Bryson DeChambeau at 7 under. Scotty Scheffler is 1 back. Max Homa 2 strokes behind. A lot of big names within 5-6 shots of the lead, including Rory McIlroy, Cameron Young, Patrick Cantlay, Tiger Woods has wrapped up his opening round. He's on the course at +1. College basketball, after pursuing, or at least thinking about pursuing, Danny Hurley and Scott Drew, it appears Kentucky will turn to one of its own to take over as head coach of the Wildcats. Mark Pope, a 1996 Kentucky grad who played for 2 seasons. He won a national championship at Kentucky. He's close to signing a 5-year deal with his alma mater. Pope has coached the last 5 seasons at BYU and led the team to a pair of NCAA tournaments, including this year. All right, time to get to our guest today. Stan Conte, maybe you've heard the name. He's the founder, owner, and physical therapist of Conte Performance. He's a licensed physical therapist, athletic trainer, 23 years of Major League Baseball experience in the management, the treatment, rehabilitation and prevention of Major League and minor league baseball players and their injuries. You look over his entire career. He got his degree, undergrad at California State, Northridge, got his doctorate in physical therapy from Boston University. This guy's resume is incredible. He was with the Giants. By the way, I don't want to fail to mention, because we always salute veterans here, he spent 4 years as a captain in the United States Army Medical Corps. Earned 2 Army Commendation Medals. So, here to that. We love our veterans here on Dialed In with Thom Brennaman. And now he owns, operates, consults with several different physical therapy clinics in 3 different states. He was with the Giants for a long time, became the director of medicine for the Dodgers, most recently with the Marlins. You've seen him in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Major League Baseball Network. He's interviewed frequently. Stan Conte, we can't thank you enough for joining us. It's on the early side. You're way out in Arizona. How's everything? It's really nice to see your face. It's been a long time.
Well, you made me pretty scared about that resume. I didn't realize I did that much. It just tells you how old I am. I've just been around a long time.
Well, I'm not buying that for a minute. I know better than that. You know, Stan, you're getting asked to do this kind of thing a lot. You have been for a long time, but especially here lately. It was just 1 week ago where the Major League Baseball Players Association comes out and says the reason we're seeing so many injuries to pitchers is because of the pitch clock. The powers that be in MLB, they come out in a scathing rebuttal saying there is no data for that. It has more to do with velocity. It has more to do with spin rate. We're going to get into all those things a little bit later on. But I want to turn back the clock with you for a minute, Stan, because when you and I first met, you were the trainer, head athletic trainer for the San Francisco Giants. This was back in the early 90s. This was a time when starting pitchers routinely, unless they give up 8 runs in the first inning, but routinely were throwing 100, 115, 125 pitches in a start. Where did all of that start to change where we rarely see that anymore?
I think it was a slow process. I mean, it used to be a starting pitcher. His goal was 30 starts. That was what he went right from the beginning. So I think that was more that way. As far as innings goes, it was how he was going, as opposed to at some point, and it's hard to know exactly when this flip-flop where, 100 pitches became a number that they couldn't go over. And part of that was really statistical in the fact that they found that the third time around in the order, the averages were higher. So then you got the analytic people involved that said you can't go over that because we know that in the third time around you're going to get hit, so that you're better off to bring in a reliever. So I think that started really about in the 2000 decade and started doing that. And as far as the pitches per game, that sort of crept up along with it. And I think a little bit had to do with us starting to do more information on injuries, and we started to see more injuries. And so that, I think, influenced a little bit that if you're pushing these guys too hard, trying to get that last inning or anything else, fatigue sets in, and that may cause a shoulder or an elbow injury.
Okay, but you hear so frequently, and you and I are old enough to hear this stuff, right? That, when we were coming up to the big leagues in the late 80s, early 90s, that's still what these guys were doing. I was fortunate enough, you saw the Jason Schmidts of the world and the Rick Rushells right there at the end and the whole 9 yards. And I was watching Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling. Now, these are special guys. I mean, these guys won Cy Youngs, Johnson's in the Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera. But even the Brian Andersons and the Miguel Batistas were guys that were out there throwing 100 and something pitches every game. And you hear so frequently the term, we started to baby pitchers. Is that inaccurate or not fair?
Well, I think it depends on where your point of view. Some are saying that we want to keep these guys healthy so they're going through the whole season. So we're going to baby them, reduce their workloads. So, what you see is there are different times that when, what are the factors that cause injuries? Well, workload definitely is that. So when you talk about, like, say, 100 pitches, are those 100 pitchers in 3 innings or are they in 7? That makes a difference. And some of the things that we look at on risk as far as pitchers going down, so we look at a lot of different and pitches per inning, which we call acute, meaning that, if a guy into 30 pitches in an inning,
right?
What are those last 5? And what we see is as soon as they get fatigue, change their mechanics. And when the mechanics change, all the forces go to the elbow, mostly to the elbow, some to the shoulder, but mostly to the elbow and the ulnar collateral ligament. And that's why over the years, it's not happened overnight, but over the years, I have a great graph that shows the number of UCL surgeries going back to 2010, and it's straight up. And so one of the problems is you're, to a certain extent, with the injuries, you're running out of pitchers. So all of a sudden you've got your AA and AAA guy up there, instead of the guys that you want. You see that a lot right now this first 10 days of the season.
Here in Cincinnati, the Reds have basically, outside of Frankie Montas, they have an entire starting rotation of guys in their early to mid-20s who say last year, really in almost every case across the board, Hunter Green, Graham Ashcraft, Nick Lodolo, who will make his season debut tomorrow, Andrew Abbott. All of these guys, because of being injured to different degrees last year, say only threw a combined 100 and 120 innings. Is there a rule, or is there some sort of metric or whatever it might be, Stan, where you say we don't want this guy pitching more than X number of innings this year based on the number of innings he pitched last year?
Yeah, we do. We not just the last year, but the last couple of years. But typically, we started this way back with Kershaw when I was with the Dodgers. And as he came up the minor league, we increased him about 25% innings-wise per year. So when he got to the major leagues, we had a top on him of 25% of what he did at AAA. So, yeah, and that 25% was arbitrary at first, but it seemed to work pretty well of not overlook a guy and saying, okay, you only had 70 pitches in the minor leagues, 70 innings last year. We're going to take you to 150. We thought that workload increase was too much. Did we reduce injuries with that? We think we did. As we got more sophisticated in looking at injuries, and again, I keep falling back into injuries, but it was very interesting. Way back in 2021, I wrote an article that we found about a number of injuries going from, this was way back in 1988 to 1999, but it showed an increase. And I presented that paper to the doctors and the medical people at the winter meetings, and they literally drove me off the stage. They said, no, people aren't getting hurt, and if they get hurt, then we're going to lose our jobs and all this other stuff. And that was the first time we actually looked at injuries. And so I've kept up on injuries since that time. And again, more and more people are getting hurt. We use the IL, which isn't a perfect situation, but the IL, and just to give you some stats, in 2023, just in the major leagues, with guys who had to go on the IL, you got to pay their salaries, and then you have to replace them with minimum salary guys. And last year in 2023, the major league clubs paid $1.147 billion on players who didn't play.
Wow,
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Why did they run you off the stage? I mean, you're sitting here trying to do them a service by saying, hey, look, you're spending a lot of money to sign these guys after you draft them. You're spending a lot of money to develop them. You've given them these big signing bonuses, et cetera. It seems to me it would be, without question, in their best interest to listen to somebody who's just done a study over 11, 12-year time frame, if I heard you right.
Right. Yeah, well, I think it was a different era way back in 2001. And slowly, more and more, a lot with people like you talking, just telling people what the injuries are and why is this guy down, why is this guy down, and we have one team that had 4 of their projected starters are on the IL, and so now they got to find 4 more starters, and unless they're the New York Yankees or the Dodgers, where they can go out and get a lot of people,
right?
That's really tough for like the Reds, like the Marlins, like Pittsburgh. You just don't have the money to do that. So way back in 2001, nobody was even thinking of injuries, and I wasn't either until those guys kind of ran me off the stage, and I thought, well, I better look at this. If all these people are excited about this, maybe they're not excited about what I said, but so I've kept records going all the way back to 1988, and it's really interesting to see the increases. And the IL is not a perfect situation because, as we saw last year, some people put them on the IL when they're not hurt. They're trying to use it as a roster thing.
Right.
But Major League Baseball has some other data that shows that, and gives us better information. The injuries have come to the forefront. 10, 12, 15 years ago, it was just a mention at the end of a broadcast. And now you're looking at all these people, and I think in the starting on the IL in this year, 2024, there were 166 people on the IL. Some of them were from Tommy John surgeries last year, but 129 of them were pitchers.
Yep. I saw that from your from the piece they wrote about you. I believe it was in USA Today. Bob Nightingale. One thing I've always been fascinated by, and you've forgotten more about this than I'll ever know, but I've really paid attention to this over the course of my career broadcasting games. It's gotten to a point, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Stan, where if a pitcher finds out he's got an elbow injury, it's going to be a year, more than likely, to come back if you have to get Tommy John. But the chances are pretty good. They're not 100%. Nothing is in life, right? But they're pretty good. They've got a chance to come back. Now, yes, there's a chance that they could further injure that down the road. Okay, I get that. But when you hear about a shoulder, it is almost like a death march. Not entirely, but almost for a pitcher. Why is that? Why have we made so much progress with the elbow, and the shoulder seems to still be sort of, a problem?
Well, let me just go back a little bit. And again, looking at shoulder and elbow injuries, starting in, I'm going way back, 1998, shoulders were the most common. And then over time, shoulder injuries decreased, but elbow injuries increased. In about 2007, 2006, it switched so that the elbow was more involved in the shoulder. Now, the shoulder is really difficult when it gets hurt because it moves in so many different movements and so much stress is on that, where the elbow is pretty much straightforward. You got your elbow that will just keeps it from holding there. It's pretty, I don't want to say simple, but it's simple in regards to that ligament being taut enough so that the guy can throw. The shoulder, however, moves all the way around, and it's real difficult when it gets hurt. The labrum gets hurt, or the rotator cuff gets hurt. It's hard to fix. Now, that said, in the last 4 or 5 years, there have been several physicians. Neil Elitraz out of Los Angeles is one of the top ones that we sent our players to, because he can get guys back in regards to that. But it's a real difficult puzzle to put that together surgically in the shoulder, where the elbow is relatively straightforward. Okay, you just reconstruct it. And also, to your point, you're right. The guy has really an 85. A guy who has a first time Tommy John, whether it's in the minor leagues, the college, or the pros, he has an 85 to 90% chance of coming back to pitch at this previous level. That's great. That has a lot to do with the surgeries, has a lot to do with the rehab people that get these guys back on. Mm-hmm. So you're right. But the second Tommy John, now we're starting to see what we call revisions, which is a second Tommy John surgery. So the guy goes 5 or 6 years or 3 years, and he blows out again. They have to reconstruct the ligament again. Those come back at 55 to 65% successful. So it goes down on the second one. And what we're seeing now is, and one of the first things we do when we do the minor league, we're looking at the combine for the draft. We look at the histories and to see, is that guy had a Tommy John when he was in high school? And if he does, that puts him in a little bit higher category. We don't throw him out, but it's a little higher category because he might have a second Tommy John. And then the question is, why are these guys going down with Tommy John surgeries? And the thing that we've seen, Dr. Keith Meister out of Dallas with the Rangers came out and said it's really about velocity. Duh. Yeah, it's definitely about velocity. And then spin rate. And those two variables are what he thinks. I think we need to know a little bit more about spin rates and that type of thing. But you know, uh, I think the problem, unfortunately, is multifactorial. For instance, when we have an AI program that we've put together that has 37 different variables, and the AI program tells us who's at risk and who's not at risk. And so we've tried to get into the AI part of this to get more sophisticated in predicting, not preventing, but predicting who might go down.
Well, that is fascinating stuff. All right, you brought it up because I touched on it and said I want to get into it a little bit later on. I feel like there's a part of me that jumped the gun a little bit. I did a small commentary the other day on just reacting from this Players Association thing, then Major League Baseball's reply to it, where I said basically I dismissed the pitch clock. The more I think about it, I'm not so sure you can really dismiss the pitch clock. Can you? As being at least a factor in this?
Well, yeah, again, it depends on the significance of the factor. So, yeah, maybe the pitch clock has something to do with it. Maybe the temperature of the game has something to do with it, right? If you go out there and it's raining and it's cold and you're throwing it, you have a little increase where the pitcher might get hurt. So this is the reason that we put 37 different variables together. So, and then you put them together. So yeah, I think the players union is looking at that clock and saying, I hope what they're saying is let's just take another closer look at that. Personally, I think that is not a big issue. I think Major League Baseball has put out their side of that thing that makes a little bit more sense in regards to it not necessarily being the speed. MLB, before they really put something out like this, they take it into the minor leagues and some independent leagues and put it out there to see is there injuries or there anything else. So they did that long before the pitch clock came in, and also they wanted to improve the game. So is there some risk on the pitch clock? Probably some. The question is how much. Is it 2% or is it 60%? I would say it's closer to 2%.
Yeah. With that in mind and talking about spin rate, these terms, spin rate, velo, all these kinds of things, right? These are all the advent of the analytics era of Major League Baseball. And look, I don't care about getting into a debate. I think that baseball has put far too much into this whole analytics thing, but that's what they're doing. And and nothing I can do about it. There are a lot of people that have pushed against it. There are a lot of people that are very much forward into it. Maybe there's a combination of the two. What's your opinion on all that? Are analytics contributing more to these injuries?
I don't know if I can go that far.
Okay.
I think analytics are important secondarily to what you're seeing on the field. So when you start seeing guys and looking at them, then the question is, do you go to the analytics to say, is this guy's release point different? Okay, is he changing release points, which may indicate fatigue? So those analytic people, so what I typically do is look at the player, look at his history, look at where he's been hurt before, all those type of things. And then I look at the analytics secondarily. It's not that I leave them out. I think you have to look at them. I think they have some good information that tells you what you're seeing. Pitching coach in the dugout, when you're sitting next to the pitching coach in the dugout, and he looks at you, he says, oh, he saw a movement with the pitcher that nobody else saw. And it may indicate the beginning of fatigue or something else. And I've seen a lot of pitching coaches then go out, slow them down, or take them out because of what they see. Now, later after the game, you go in and say, oh yeah, look, his release point was off. The analytics said the release was off. That tells you that what you're seeing is correct. So I think that there's a big thing with analytics. The problem is there are some teams that do everything on analytics. I talked to an ex major league uh, coach, been around for about 100 years, and he said, I was sitting with the guy at a game with a GM. He said he never even looked at the game. He didn't watch the game. He was watching the analytics on his computer.
Sure.
So I think again the pendulum swings back and forth, right? And right now the swing is swinging a lot toward analytics, which I think is important, but maybe not as important as all the analytic people think. I think it's important to know it.
All right, last thing I want to ask you about, and I'll let you go. You've been so generous with your time. Solutions. Look, they're probably a whole pile of them, right? A laundry list. It seems to me, and I remember you're a good friend of mine, Matt Williams, right? One of the great players, third baseman in the history of the game. After he left the Giants, or technically left the Indians, and he came to the Diamondbacks, his son was a really good high school and college baseball player. I asked him, and there was talk about him getting drafted this particular year, and he just said, you know what? He said he's already told everybody he doesn't even want to be eligible for the draft. I said, well, why not? He said he's burned out on baseball. He's done. He's done. He said, and he's got 10 teammates of his over here at Grand Canyon that are in the same boat. So you know where I'm going with this. As it pertains to pitching, and I know you work with a lot of young people, high school kids, their moms and dads, their coaches, all that kind of thing, college coaches. They have to have some kind of hand in this too, right?
A lot. Especially a guy who has a father who was really a good college player. It's like, and he remembers the time. So you get these kids, and it's called early specialization. These kids are picking up sport when they're 7 years old, and that's all they're playing. And with the theory that the more that they play, the better they will be and better chance of getting to the major leagues. It just isn't true. But that doesn't stop the parents or the kids or the coaches, for that matter, to say, listen, you need to be on travel teams. You need to be on the high school team. You have to be this. And you get these guys, that, especially the pitchers, and the reason we're seeing more and more Tommy John surgeries with 15 and 16-year-olds is because they're pitching 4 times a week because they have one travel team. They got the high school team, and then they've got another team they're going to. They may be on 3 or 4 different teams, and they're playing 12 months a year.
Yep.
And so 2 things happen. One, they get hurt. That's what I tell the parents. You're going to get them hurt. And the second is the chance of them actually making it is really low. And then they burn out. They just get tired. They look at their dad and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And there's no way of calculating how many of those kids are doing that. But, the question is it for the kids or for the parents or is it for the coach? I mean, the coach, if that guy from high school gets into a Division I baseball team, that coach looks good. If the guy gets drafted from the colleges, that makes that coach look good. So they push them. Not all of them. There's a lot of good guys out there that do the right thing. But I do think the early specialization is something that not only burns them out, but actually hurts them.
All right, last thing I want to ask you about, because people here in Cincinnati have lost their minds about Joe Burrow, the Bengals quarterback, who I'm sure you're familiar with. And I'm not asking you to be insight on his specific injury, which was a wrist injury. But based on, you've seen a lot of guys that have had these kinds of things. Is there a specific challenge coming back from wrist surgery as opposed to elbow surgery, as opposed to shoulder surgery? Is there something unique that makes it less difficult to come back, more difficult to come back from?
Well, I'm not really familiar with a specific injury because the trouble with the wrist is it's got a lot of stuff in there. And there's a lot of things that can get hurt, so it depends on what it is. But I can tell you, I'd rather have a wrist injury than a shoulder injury. As far as a quarterback goes, the mechanics of throwing a football is different than a pitcher. You don't put as much stress on the UCL. That's the reason you don't see that many UCLs in football. You usually see it because the guy is hit and his elbows pushed back. But yeah, I would tell you that again, not knowing
right.
that thing, I would pick a wrist over a shoulder any day.
Absolutely. Stan, we can't thank you enough for your time this morning, my friend. I know you got a lot going on. I mean, you got more jobs and you know what to do with, but you keep on rolling and you've done such great work. And thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.
All right. Stan Conte, kind enough to join us. He's out in Arizona. He's working with high school guys, college guys, pro guys, minor leaguers, major leaguers. I mean, a lot of people travel all over the country to come to be with him and his son. They own these things. They have a huge staff, strength and conditioning guys. They're doing phenomenal work. You know, there's a lot of interesting stuff there, Casey. I find this thing fascinating. And there really is no easy answer on it.
I agree with that. I thought the most interesting part that he wanted to bring up was the youth side of baseball and pitching. I just thought that was I should be on myself there. You know, I thought it was just really interesting that just saying like the young pitchers that are just wearing themselves out so early because they're just asking at such a young age to start really ripping the ball. And at that age, you really don't need to be doing that. You need to just work on mechanics, getting it over the plate, maybe even just, you know, the accuracy of it.
Throwing strikes.
Yeah, just throwing strikes.
Throwing strikes.
Being able to paint the strike zone, you know, just being able to target. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the whole thing is just, you know, I've always found it interesting. And look, it's different muscle, twitch, all these kinds of things. But let's look at this for a second, okay? If you take the three major sports, and I'll even throw in hockey, and I'll throw in soccer, okay? So let's say of the five major sports, baseball, football, basketball, soccer, hockey, okay? Only one of them is not a year-round sport. It's not to suggest that you're not training year-round to be a football player, but you're not going to go up and wrestle up 22 dudes or even 14 dudes 7-on-7, right? And play football. Your risk of injury is greater than football than the other sports. But I find it very interesting that the one sport among the five where you don't ask kids to go play year-round. I mean, Lord knows there are parents watching right now. This soccer thing, good Lord. If you've got a kid that's a hockey player, I mean, it is all the time.
Right.
Winter, spring, summer, fall. Soccer, same thing. Baseball, same thing. Basketball, AAU, summertime, all this. I mean, it never ends for these kids. And football's the one that doesn't. Now, it has the greatest risk of injury because of the contact involved compared to the other four. Hockey, maybe it's close, but not on a play-by-play basis. There is not constant hitting in hockey like there is constant collisions in football. I mean, that's like a big duh. But I just think it's, you know, you don't hear of a lot of guys getting burned out on football. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with that.
Now, you got to be a special kind of athlete to play football.
Yeah.
Compared to, and you do in each of those. But I just find it so interesting. And, you know, you heard what he said there a minute ago about the Reds pitchers and how you don't want to, he was there from the day Clayton Kershaw made his big league debut for the Dodgers. He was their director of medicine, Stan Conte, and how they had a whole plan. No more than 25% the next year. And actually, that number's a little high compared to some other teams around baseball. And that's why I worry about this Reds team. Because if you go back and you look at the number of innings thrown last year, Ashcraft, injured list 2 or 3 times. Hunter Green, missed extended periods of times last year, right? Abbott, you pushed him, and look what happened, okay? Lodolo barely pitched at all last year. So that's my concern for this. Montas, I mean, Montas has basically gone 2 years without pitching. He pitched 1 inning last year. 1! And so I wonder who's going to be around to start games in August, even if you applied the 25% rule.
Yeah, and we talked about, too, on your show like a week or two ago about how long that spring training is and how much they're pitching to get ready for that. On top of that, some of these guys, it feels like they're already worn out by the time the season even started. They're not as effective. They're not controlling the ball like they were early on. And I'm with you, Tom. I feel like if maybe they were to try to dial it back a little bit and learn to control the ball more than, and we've already hit this point over and over again, but if the Reds pitching staff were able to just control the ball, I think we've seen more success from guys like Montas, who have pretty good control of the ball right now. Might not have the stuff like Green does.
And Ashcraft, he's controlled the ball.
Yeah, I feel like both those guys have done very well so far up to this point. Now, Ashcraft had a really bad night the other night, but it was getting towards the end of – he should have been pulled out much sooner, I think, at that point. But, yeah, I mean – I don't know what the Reds are going to do. I feel like they're already going down that slippery slope. We've got a tired bullpen already, and we'll see what happens here in August and September.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But 500 is the bottom line. They're 500. I mean, this isn't 3-22. This isn't 7-15. This isn't 3-9. They're 6-6. They've got teams in their division playing well. The only thing that bothered me the other day, and it's youth, so you write it off. But David Bell had a meeting before the Milwaukee game, and I thought it was an excellent move with his team to say, hey, look, this is one of the reasons why we lost the division last year is because the Milwaukee Brewers, among others. But the Milwaukee Brewers kicked our teeth in. They were 10-3 against us last year. We got to set the tone right out of the gate. And the Reds did. First game of the series, they take it to them. But then when you go to the clubhouse after and again, I excuse it because it's youth. And I would like to think that somebody has come to Ellie De La Cruz and said, dude, we won 1 game. We don't need to be telling the press about getting ready for the World Series. We don't need that stuff. All right? So what happens? And I'm not suggesting that that's the reason, but the next 2 nights, the Brewers kicked their ass. You don't need to tell the Brewers what you're going to do. Just go do it. Just go do it. Go win the game. And after you beat them, says, hey, man, that's a good team. They got a good team. We think we're a good team. We have a lot of goals for this team this year. We want to win the division. We want to get in the playoffs. We want to get to the World Series. We want to win the World Series. Not, we're getting ready for the World Series.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little bit of a struggle with the language barrier that he's still learning.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right.
I'm with you on that a little bit. I mean, let's take it a little slower, a little smaller steps at a time,
That's right. Just take it slow. They've got a lot of talent. I like their team a lot. I really do. I like their team a lot. And I think that it could be an incredible summer around here. Yeah. All right. That's going to do it. Masters on all weekend. We'll recap all of that on Monday. Does Mark Pope take over at Kentucky? That's a word on the street. It's not official yet, but that's a word on the street. And how will the Reds fare in Chicago? Look, they won a series they were supposed to with the Nationals. They won a series they probably weren't supposed to against Philadelphia. You felt good about it. Okay? They come back home and you're playing the Mets. And you're thinking, okay, well, we're at home. We got to get these guys 2 out of 3. You lose 2 out of 3. Then here come the Brewers. You get 1 game wrapped up, rained out yesterday, but you lose 2 out of 3 to them. This weekend series, and it's not like the season's over if they don't. But if you want to be there in August and September, this is the kind of series you have to win. I'm not saying you have to sweep the White Sox. They stink. But everybody can have a good night, okay? A good starting pitching night, right? They just shut you down. But Monday, we'll find out how the Reds fared this weekend before they go to Seattle.
I mean, I feel like all eyes are on. Is it Saturday when Lodolo plays?
Tomorrow, yes.
All eyes are going to be on that game.
No doubt about it.
They got to perform well. He's got to perform well.
Well, he had a really good game his first start in AAA, and then the last game he was awful.
That's not good.
I mean, he hit 2 of the last 3 or 3 of the last 4 batters that he faced. Couldn't even get through 3 innings. But again, I don't worry about that. Let's just see what he does here. That's the bottom line. And everybody's rooting for him. You want to see the guy come back because he seems like a really good dude and he cares. And man, when he's healthy, he's got a chance to be mighty good. Best of the whole group, in my opinion. Okay. All right. So, Casey, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Tom.
Good to see you. We thank Stan Conte. We thank all of you, thousands, watching here today live on Chatterbox Sports and the Believe Network. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great, healthy weekend. Godspeed ahead.